In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to find and fix bugs in your programs. So here's the multiply function we wrote earlier. Let's add a couple of statements after this function. So print start, and then we'll call the multiply function, give it 3 arguments, 1, 2, and 3. So the result should be 6. And here we print the result on the terminal. Now to create a bug in this program, I'm going to deliberately indent this return statement. So now when we run this program, instead of 6, we get 1. So we're going to use a technique called debugging to find and fix this bug. All right, first we need to open the debugging panel. The first time you want to use debugging in a Python project, you need to click this icon. This will generate a new file called launch.json. In this file, we have a bunch of debugging configuration. You never have to touch any of this, so don't worry about it. Close it. You can see this file is placed inside of this VS Code folder. It's right here, launch.json. Now, when we have this file, we can go to the debugging panel, and from this list, we can select a debugging configuration. Some of these configurations are useful for more complex applications. For example, we use Python Django to debug a web application built with Python. For this course, we're going to use Python current file with integrated terminal. So select this. Now to start debugging, first we need to add a breakpoint on one of these statements. So I'm going to put the cursor on line 8 and insert a breakpoint by pressing F9. So this is our breakpoint. We can press F9 one more time to remove it. If you're on a Mac keyboard, you should press the function key, which is on the bottom left corner of your keyboard, and then press F9. So here we have a breakpoint. Now we can press F5 to run the application up to this point. So F5. So this automatically opens the integrated terminal here. Don't worry about this. I'm going to close it. So you can see our program is running up to this point. This line is highlighted. Now we can execute this program line by line and see exactly what happens at runtime. So to execute one statement at a time, press F10. Okay, we're done. Now we're on line 9. However, on line 9, we're calling the multiply function. If we press F10 again, the execution stops. So we couldn't figure out why we got 1 as the result of multiplying these numbers. So let's start debugging one more time. We press F5. So once again, we are on line 8. Let's step over this line with F10. Now this time, we want to step into this multiply function so we see exactly what is going on here. So instead of F10, press F11. Now we are on line 2. So if you're calling a function that you have defined, you can step into that function using F11. Now here we are in the multiply function. On the left side, inside the variables panel, you can see all the variables that are meaningful in this function. So under locals, we have numbers. So this is our numbers argument. You can see this is set to a tuple with 3 numbers, 1, 2, 3, right? Now our total variable is not in this list because it's not defined yet. The moment we step over this line with F10, total comes to existence, and you can see initially it's set to 1. Now we are at the beginning of our for loop. Let's press F10 one more time. Here we are. We're going to multiply total by number, so let's step over this line as well. Now at this point, we have a new variable called number. That is our loop variable. Initially it's set to 1. Now here we are on line 5. If we press F10, we can see we jump out of this function. So our loop did not execute to completion. And that is the reason our program has a bug. So to fix this, I'm going to stop the debugger with Shift and F5. Now, back here, let's remove the indentation, save the changes, run the program in debug mode one more time. So we press F5. Here we are. Let's step over this with F10. Now step into this with F11. and step over these lines with F10 a few more times. So F10, one more time, total is set. Now we are in the second iteration. Let's press F10 one more time. In this iteration, you can see number is set to 2. Our total is still 1. So let's step over this line as well. Now total is updated to 2. Here we are at the beginning of the third iteration. Let's step over this line. In this iteration, number is 3. So after we execute this line, because total is currently 2, when we multiply it by 3, we'll get 6. So F10, one more time. Now we only have 3 iterations in this loop. So if we press F10 one more time, our loop completes. Now we are ready to return total, which is currently 6. So F10, we are on line 9, and we're done. Now one more tip. In this demo, I put the breakpoint on the first line of the program. You don't always have to do this. For example, here we know that our multiply function has a bug. So instead of putting the breakpoint on line 8, we could put it on line 2. So when we start the program in debug mode with F5, we immediately start in the multiply function. And one more tip before we finish this lecture. If you step into a function and you know that that function works properly, you can immediately step out of that function with Shift and F11. So you don't have to execute the entire function line by line. You can press Shift and F11 to step out of that function.